Today you will see the rarest unusual photos as well as mysterious objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. Street fight in Havana, January 1959. A policeman with a pistol and a rebel with his bare hands. The moment before the shot was fired in the last hours of the Cuban Revolution. Mukden, China, 1910. In the midst of a pneumonic plague epidemic, employees in makeshift protective suits disinfect an anatomical table. Thick robes, masks, and a fog of death gear were an attempt to stop an invisible enemy that killed people in a matter of hours. Arlington, Virginia, 1967. A young protester calmly inserts a flower into the barrel of a rifle, a symbol of peace in the face of military force, one gesture against dozens of bayonets, which became an icon of the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War. USA, 1918, masked spectators sit in the stands of a football match during the Spanish flu pandemic. Even the deadly virus did not stop the match at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Only silence and bandages on their faces reminded them of what was happening around them. Belka and Strelka, 1960, the first dogs to make an orbital flight and return alive. Their mission opened the way for man into space and became a symbol of the scientific breakthrough of the USSR. There are dozens of experiments behind the scenes, but these two have made history. December 26, 1965. A pilot makes an incredible landing directly on the George Washington Bridge due to engine failure. A narrow span, a busy highway, and yet not a single victim. One of the most unusual emergency landings in the history of U.S. aviation. May 9, 1945, Berlin. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel signs the Act of Unconditional Surrender of Germany. On the table, there is a sword, a cap, and the last signature of the Third Reich. Since that moment, the Second World War in Europe has officially ended. USA, August 15, 1969. The participants were stuck in a kilometer-long traffic jam on their way to Woodstock, but no one was in a hurry. Music, guitars, and complete freedom right on the hoods of cars. An era began that became a symbol of peace, love, and rebellion against the system. December 1945, Hiroshima. A Japanese woman holds a baby against a backdrop of charred trees and a dead city. In her gaze, there is both the pain of loss and the strength to survive after the catastrophe that divided the history of mankind into before and after. Mexico, 1937. One photo shows the artist Frida Kahlo, the revolutionary Leon Trotsky, his wife Natalia Sadova, and the Marxist Max Schachmann. Art, politics, and exile intersect in a house where a short but legendary romance breaks out. A 1950s oval-screen TV with a massive wooden case was an object that gathered entire families around it. In an era when there were only a few channels on the air, it became a window into another world and a symbol of technological progress in the post-war era. 1937, Mount Wilson Observatory. Astronomer Edwin Hubble is working at a giant telescope, which will soon prove that the universe is not static, it is expanding. This image is a moment before the scientific revolution that changed our understanding of space forever. May 26, 1941, Kansas. Students of the Kappa Sigma Upsilon fraternity throw sheets out of the dorm windows, preparing for an open-air party. There is fun, carefree, and youthful atmosphere in the air against the backdrop of an old house and a retro car. June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach. Under machine gun fire and amid water barriers, an American soldier makes his way to the shore in the first minutes of the Normandy landings. Robert Capa's photograph has become one of the most recognizable and disturbing images of the Second World War. December 1947, Madison Square Garden. Legendary champion Joe Louis ended up on the floor after hitting Joe Walcott's jersey, causing the crowd to freeze. This fight was one of the most intense moments in heavyweight history. 1948, Kremlin, Colorado. Dr. Ernest Seriani drinks coffee in the hospital kitchen after an operation that lasted until late at night. Fatigue, silence, and a simple mug became his only break between saving lives. The Korean War, the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. The American Marines are retreating through a narrow, frozen canyon, nicknamed by them the Alley of Nightmares. The cold, Darkness and the constant threat of encirclement have made this one of the harshest paths in U.S. history. The prayer book in Polish-Lithuanian, with a luxurious metal binding and enamel, is a genuine artifact of the late 19th century. Such books were often inherited and served not only as a spiritual support, but also as a symbol of faith that has stood the test of time. 1959, an unusual portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, captured in a jump by the famous photographer Philip Halsman. Former King Edward VIII, who gave up the throne for love, seems to hover for a moment outside of time and protocols. 1961, Mississippi. Civil rights activists Julia Aaron and David Dennis are riding surrounded by National Guard soldiers to protect them from possible aggression. Their calmness against the background of weapons is a symbol of the inner strength of the movement for freedom and equality. Moscow, early 1900s. The vegetarian canteen on Nikitsky Boulevard is a rare corner of alternative nutrition and philosophy in the Russian Empire. The columns, the signboard, and the gas lamp all breathe an era in which caring for the body has already met with the idea of enlightenment. June 1958, an underwater nuclear explosion off the coast of the United States. A powerful column of water shot up into the sky, swallowing everything in its path, a demonstration of the power and fear of the Cold War. The ship is in the background, like a toy in the face of the irreversible. 1944, the Eastern Front. A wounded Soviet soldier with a bandaged head screams and points out the direction of fire, while a comrade with a PCA is hiding in a trench. One shot, and all the rage, pain, and determination of the last year of the Great Patriotic War. Moscow, 1983. A pensioner solves a crossword puzzle right in the window of the newspaper Evening Moscow, as thousands of citizens did. The street press was not only a source of news, but also a place of quiet intellectual battles. A set of tools inherited from my grandfather. Everything is in its place. Joiner's clamps, planes, screwdrivers, calipers, old pliers and saws. The wall panel is handmade. My grandfather used it every day. A real working legacy, not just a memory. New York, November 1963. People on the train are reading the latest newspapers with headlines about the assassination of President Kennedy, the moment when the country learned about the tragedy. The year is 1971. Muhammad Ali teases Joe Frazier through the gym window before the fight of the century. Frazier won that fight on points after 15 rounds. The 1980s, the early years of his career. Nicole Kidman poses in an image typical of the era. Lush hair, school uniform, bold look. The photo was taken long before her worldwide fame. Moscow, 1973. The Soyuz Ploto import alcoholic beverage commercial is a rare example of Soviet glossy aesthetics. Elegant young people in the garden, serving, crystal, and a bottle with the inscription Stolichnaya. The year is 1970. The members of the band Queen at the beginning of the journey are John Deacon, Freddie Mercury, Roger Taylor, and Brian May. Photos before world fame and stadium anthems. Ypres, Belgium, 1917. An Australian soldier walks through a destroyed city after shelling. The First World War wiped out entire neighborhoods. A 1930s rattle in the form of a clown, a toy for babies with springy eyes and a creepy smile, is an example of what a fun childhood used to look like. New York Street, 1969. The girl with the neat handbag and the guy in the leopard suit both look like they came out of the cover of a fashion magazine, a vivid example of the style of the late 60s. Confidence, freedom, and no boredom. At first glance, it looks like a demonic figure, but if you look in the mirror, you'll see a sad woman. This is the famous two-sided statue of Mephistopheles and Margarita from the Salar Jung Museum in India. On the one hand, the devil, on the other, innocence. In ancient Egyptian frescoes, you can actually see scenes where baboons participate in the capture of fugitives. These animals did not just adorn court life, they were trained and used as assistants in guarding and detaining violators of order. In 1965, the crew of the American Skyraider A-1 aircraft attached a real toilet bowl to the wing and dropped it like a bomb. It was a playful response to bureaucracy and pointless orders. the toilet bowl has become a symbol of military absurdity and one of the most unusual shells in the history of aviation. In the 19th century, women were discouraged from cycling by scaring them with the so-called bicycle face, as if their expression would change forever, bulging eyes and a pointed chin. This fiction was used as a way to keep women from freedom and an active lifestyle. An ostracon is a piece of pottery on which the names of those who were about to be expelled from the city were written in ancient Greece, hence the expression ostracize, that is, exclude from society. Vietnam, 1966. Wounded Marine Sergeant Jeremiah Prudy makes his way through the mud to a seriously wounded comrade. Larry Barrow's photo has become a symbol of pain, brotherhood, and the brutal reality of war. The picture shows Sabiha Gökçen, the first female fighter pilot in Turkey and one of the first in the world. In 1937, she participated in military operations, becoming a symbol of women's emancipation and the pride of Turkish aviation. During the Great London Smog of 1952, the air was so thick with pollution that people literally couldn't see beyond arm's length. In conditions where the sighted were lost in dense fog, the blind, accustomed to navigate without sight, suddenly became guides. They helped others find their way home. In India, swords or knives were sometimes attached to the tusks of war elephants during battles. This was done in order to enhance the destructive power of elephants when attacking enemy troops. Such tactics were aimed at spreading terror and panic in the ranks of the enemy. Railway tracks to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. During the Second World War, prisoners were transported in such wagons, most often one way. Today, this place is a memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. Budapest, 1956. During the Hungarian uprising, a crowd burned Marxist-Leninist books in the street as a symbol of a break with Soviet ideology. This act became one of the clearest images of resistance to Soviet influence. One of the staircases of the Knossos Palace in Crete, the oldest palace complex in Europe. It is more than 4,000 years old, and it was the center of the Minoan civilization, famous for its architecture and myths about the labyrinth of the Minotaur. Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller are one of the most unexpected unions in Hollywood. She is an icon of sexuality. He is an intellectual and a playwright. Their marriage in 1957 became a sensation. It seemed as if two completely different worlds were meeting, and at the same time there was tenderness and warmth between them, noticeable even in a black and white photograph. Two cooks in a Moscow canteen are preparing lunch for the workers. The picture shows the usual life of Soviet kitchens: strict dressing gowns, neat portions, and sterile cleanliness. The year is 1959. Princess Diana participates in the school race in 1991 as an ordinary mother, rooting for her son, Harry. Violating royal protocol, she went to the launch in casual clothes and with a smile on her face, which won even more sympathy from ordinary Britons. Arnold Schwarzenegger and the actors in the image of barbarians have a quiet lunch between takes on the set of the movie Conan the Destroyer. The contrast between the costumes and the dining atmosphere creates an almost comical effect. 1984. Traditional Dutch hairstyle, 1943. These haircuts were worn by women from rural areas of the Netherlands, where each region had its own unique styling. The parting pattern and shaved nape were part of the local culture and were often combined with headdresses. The Normandy landings, 1944. This rare shot shows military cyclists landing from a ship on the French coast. Bicycles were used for the rapid transfer of troops and communications already on land, especially in the absence of equipment. The photo shows an antique table calendar, made of metal with decorative engraving. Such calendars were popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, especially in Europe. Dates, days of the week, and months are changed manually using the side-rotating knobs. It is not only a functional item, but also an exquisite element of the interior, often standing on the desks of wealthy people. A store in Newcastle, England, 1852. There's Hudson's soap and sweets in the window. The girl looks inside curiously while the women are buying vegetables on the street stalls. The atmosphere of quiet, everyday life against the background of a cobbled street reflects the realities of Victorian England. These tiny leather shoes belonged to a child in ancient Rome. Despite their age of 2,000 years, they are surprisingly well preserved. Even decorative holes are visible. Such a find helps to imagine how children dressed in those distant times, and how masterfully the Romans processed leather. Young students perform exercises on benches in the open air in the courtyard of an English school, 1900. Physical education was already a part of the compulsory curriculum at that time, although the approach to it was much more disciplined and formal. Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin, at the height of their childhood fame, 1993. The photo was taken during the filming of the movie The Good Son, where both played key roles. The funny moment with the horns behind his head reflects true friendship behind the scenes, despite the dark plot of the film itself. The photo shows Marcela Gracia Ibez and Elisa Sanchez Loriga, who got married in Spain at the beginning of the 20th century. Eliza hid under the male name Mario and the appearance of a man in order to circumvent the laws. This union is considered one of the first documented same-sex marriages in Europe. The couple's story became a symbol of the struggle for the rights of the LGBT community long before people started talking about it out loud. On the set of the legendary movie Titanic, 1997, the iconic scene on the bow of the ship, where the characters Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet fly over the ocean, was created like this, on a huge set mounted on a platform. The camera is on tap, the actors are on high. The illusion of cinema is the result of precise calculations and engineering. Sergei Krikalev is a Soviet cosmonaut who returned to Earth from a long space mission on March 25, 1992. When he left, the USSR existed. When he returned, he was gone. During the flight, the country to which he had sworn allegiance ceased to exist. He is called the last citizen of the USSR. The house where William Shakespeare was born, photographed in 1850, Stratford-upon-Avon. The facade is in a typical Tudor style with wooden beams and plaster. Cellars can be seen in the window. Later, a museum dedicated to the great playwright will open in this house. This is one of the last known photos of Dyatlov's group, taken in January 1959. Tourists are skiing along the snow-covered riverbed. A sledge with a horse carrying equipment is moving nearby. The photo is permeated with calm, but in the context of the subsequent tragedy, it is perceived ominously. A few days later, all the members of the expedition will die under mysterious circumstances, giving rise to one of the most mystical cases of the 20th century. The photo shows the 14th Dalai Lama, taken in 1937, when the boy was only 2 years old. He was recognized as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama and soon became the youngest spiritual leader of Tibet. The picture was taken during one of the religious ceremonies symbolizing the recognition and veneration of the new incarnation. There is a Buddha statue behind the baby's back, as a symbol of continuity and spiritual strength. St. Augustine's Church, Warsaw, 1945. After the complete destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto by the Nazis, this building turned out to be almost the only one preserved among the total ruins, a symbol of survival against the background of the obliterated neighborhoods. The year is 1887. A Jewish shoemaker prepares for Shabbat, sitting at a modest table in the coal cellar where he lives with his family. On the table there is a candle, a challah loaf covered with a tablecloth, and a tin cup. There are makeshift shelves, clothes, and tools in a cramped, cold room. Despite his poverty, the man tries to observe traditions and preserve dignity. The photo shows a unique example of transporting an adult tree along with roots and soil. Such an operation requires specialized equipment. A massive platform distributes the weight so as not to damage the root system. This allows you to move the tree to a new location without digging or replanting. Similar technologies are used in the reconstruction of parks, the construction or preservation of valuable tree species. Leningrad, May 1941, Cafe Pastry Shop on Nevsky Prospect. Just a few weeks before the start of the Great Patriotic War. There are citizens in light, colored clothes at elegant tables, with the dome of the Kazan Cathedral against the background. The atmosphere of a peaceful, almost serene life, which will soon be disrupted by war. The photo was painted by artist Angelina Kapunina. U.S. patrol inspectors check cars at the border. El Paso, Texas, 1941. The World War II checkpoint looked as simple as a wooden sign and a few officers. The photo shows the German sailboat Padua, built in 1926. In 1946, after the end of World War II, the ship was transferred to the Soviet Union as reparations and renamed the Krusenstern in honor of the Russian navigator. This bark became a training ship of the USSR Navy and later the largest operational sailboat in the world. The picture was taken in the Baltic Sea during the distillation of a vessel in the USSR. In the photo, soldiers dismantle defensive barriers on the border between West and East Germany, 1989. This is the symbolic and real end of a divided Europe. After 28 years of the Iron Curtain, the border is beginning to disappear literally before our eyes. In a few weeks, the Berlin Wall will fall. White farmers, father and son, pose with guns at the entrance to a house in Zimbabwe, 1986. The photo was taken 7 years after the end of the War of Independence, but long before the start of the campaign to confiscate land from the white minority, which starts only in 1999. Amid the temporary calm in the country, the family is still living in anticipation of possible threats. A Soviet tanker pours vodka to a British sapper. The picture was taken in May 1945, during the end of the Second World War. On the background is a Soviet tank decorated with camouflage branches. This is a mechanical calculator from the 1940s. The numbers were entered using a metal rod, which was moved by sliders. Each column was responsible for a single digit, units, tens, hundreds. The device allowed addition and subtraction to be performed without electricity. Such calculators were used before the advent of electronic ones. Children in the orphanage pray before going to bed. 87. The environment is harsh. Brick walls, hard beds, strict teacher. Despite the difficult conditions, the children line up in a row, bowing their heads in prayer, the only moment of peace and quiet in their difficult lives. Experimental equipment of the Soldier of the Future, USA, 1959. A photo for Life magazine, taken at the Fort Ord military base in California, demonstrates how the U.S. military imagined a fighter in the era of possible nuclear wars. The kit included an aluminum rifle that can fire up to 700 rounds per minute, a heat-resistant mask, a radio helmet, tinted glasses, a nylon bulletproof vest, and a portable jetpack. This sword, found on the territory of the Spanish castle of Ain, dates back to the Middle Ages. The length of the blade is 94 centimeters. The artifact has been preserved in the ground, covered with corrosion, but still shows a recognizable shape with a round pommel and a cross-shaped guard, characteristic features of the battle swords of that time. Icelandic singer Björk during an unusual walk through Covent Garden in London, 1994. This photo has become an iconic example of her eccentric style and vibrant personality. In the photo, Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray on the set of the cult movie Ghostbusters, 1984. Aykroyd is wearing a jumpsuit with the team's logo, and Murray is wearing a jacket. Behind them are the decorations of a scene with destruction and the entrance to the building used as the hunter's headquarters. In the 1970s, an unusual wellness procedure was used in Piatigorsk sanatoriums. Radon baths in capsules with transparent domes. The patients were placed in special boxes where their bodies were irradiated with radon vapor, which was considered curative for skin and joint diseases. The photo shows one of the most unexpected TV shows of the late 70s. Sylvester Stallone, already famous for his role as Rocky, appears in the cult Muppet Show. An episode with his participation was released in 1979, becoming part of a series of star invitations that raised the rating of the show. The photo shows the Guinness Book of Records record holder, a microbook measuring 0.75 x 0.75 millimeters, placed next to the eye of a sewing needle for scale. It was created in Japan by Toppen Printing in 2013. Despite its small size, the book contains 22 pages with illustrations and text that can only be read under a microscope. A Soviet officer, holding himself confidently and intently, reads out the terms of the surrender of the German army. May 1945, Berlin. The attention of passers-by is riveted on his words. On the faces of women and men, there is a mixture of relief, confusion, and hope. This is not just an announcement, but an official point in one of the most devastating wars of the 20th century. Dr. Evan O'Neill, Kane went down in history as a surgeon who self-removed a hernia. In the 1932 photo, he performed surgery on himself under local anesthesia to prove its effectiveness and safety. This case became a medical sensation, and Kane became a symbol of courage and scientific risk. The 1933 photo shows Hitler in a beer bar, surrounded by young people listening to him. The atmosphere is tense and important for propaganda. Joe Razzo, one of the heaviest men in the world, pictured in 1931. He is sitting at the table, drinking from a cup, and holding meat on a fork. The boy next to him looks at him curiously. Razzo looks calm despite his bulk. In the photo from 1999, Boris Yeltsin leaves the Kremlin. He looks tired and determined. His gestures and facial expressions emphasize the importance of this moment. This departure symbolizes the end of an era and changes in Russia. The photo shows a destroyed convoy of NATO fuel trucks after a terrorist attack in Pakistan on August 22, 2011. Fiery clouds and black smoke rise into the sky. The explosion left chaos and destruction in its wake. This incident highlighted the danger of terrorist attacks on strategic facilities. Leonid Brezhnev and Richard Nixon are the leaders of the USSR and the USA, who met in 1974. This was one of the first major achievements of détente in the Cold War. Their negotiations contributed to the signing of arms control treaties. Thai women pose at an exhibition in 1889, which became the prototype of the Paris Zoo. They demonstrate a traditional costume and stance, attracting the attention of the audience. The photo shows the colonial practice of displaying African peoples as exhibits. The Choir of the Don Cossacks in Egypt, 1930. At the Pyramid of Cheops, they perform on tour, demonstrating Cossack culture outside of Russia. The band performs traditional songs and costumes, emphasizing national identity. Marta Farah pulls a tightrope with 16 competitors, 1925. These competitions showcase women's physical fitness and the fight for equality. In those years, such performances were rare and provocative. A couple in love on the Seine embankment, Paris, 1944. They are sitting on a broken bicycle behind a fence, symbolizing the destruction of the Second World War. Elizabeth Taylor watches a boxing match in 1960. She expresses surprise and delight, sitting on the podium among the men. Women in Leningrad, 1952, on a pipeline trench. They decided to show their legs despite the difficult conditions. Pablo Picasso dressed as a sea captain, 1957. Queen Elizabeth is driving a car carrying Prince Charles and Princess Anne, 1957, a rare moment in the daily life of the royal family. The creators of The Simpsons at Work, 1992. The room is littered with food, posters, and ideas. A TV legend was born in such chaos. It was during these years that the show gained incredible popularity and formed its iconic style. The future president of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, with his cousin, 1910. A carefree moment on the water is far from the White House and world politics. The young Roosevelt here is just a cheerful gentleman with a mischievous personality. Little Dutch immigrants, 1910. In traditional clothes and with documents in their hands, they had just arrived in the New World. His homeland was left behind, and an unknown future and hope for a better life lay ahead. Flowers at Buckingham Palace in London in memory of the deceased Princess Diana. The year is 1997. Millions of flowers from ordinary people overwhelmed by grief is a rare moment when the country seemed to come to a standstill. It became one of the most touching expressions of popular love in the history of Great Britain. Medal-winning figure skaters, Diane DeLeeuw, Netherlands, Dorothy Hamill, USA, gold, Kristen Herath, GDR. Innsbruck, 1976. The Olympic podium became a scene of triumph, grace, and intense struggle. These athletes have gone down in history as symbols of the style of their time. Steam locomotive IS-2016, the most powerful in the history of the Soviet steam locomotive industry. 37. Named after Joseph Stalin, this giant symbolized the industrial might and ambitions of the USSR. Its streamlined shapes and scale are impressive even today. The metal filmoscope, F49, with a characteristic handle and lens, was used for showing film strips at home. In the common people, he was called a tank for the shape of the hull. The children inserted a film with frames of fairy tales, turned the crank, and watched the stories on the wall. It was an accessible and magical entertainment of the Soviet era. Chuck Norris performs a handstand while balancing on a moving skateboard. The picture was taken in the USA in the 1970s, when skateboarding was just beginning to become fashionable. This trick became a symbol of the actor's physical fitness and the spirit of experimentation of that era. Arnold Schwarzenegger laughs while sitting on the shoulders of bodybuilder Lisa Lyon. He is the epitome of bodybuilding at that time, and she is one of the first women to popularize women's power aesthetics. On the set of the 1996 movie Men in Black, a special effects engineer manually adjusts a tiny alien inside a mechanical android head. This iconic prop became a symbol of the mastery of practical effects and film fantasy of the 90s, when digital technology was not yet dominant. Nurses at the front of the First World War, 1918. Due to the shortage of mass-produced gas masks, women made protection by hand, from fabric, glass lenses, and improvised materials. Such images today evoke more associations with the post-apocalypse than with the real medical service. France, 1870s. The women's pistol ring, disguised as jewelry, contained several miniature barrels and could fire real bullets. Such accessories were used by women for self-defense in turbulent times, combining aesthetics with weapons. The year is 1927. The peasants have returned from the city and are talking with admiration about the tram ride. This photo became a symbol of the clash of the rural lifestyle with a rapidly changing industrial society where the tram was perceived as something magical and incomprehensible. Chechen wedding, 1990s. The bride poses in a traditional white dress, surrounded by armed men, friends, and relatives of the groom. John Lennon passionately kisses May Pang at a noisy party in the 1970s. This period in the musician's life is called the Lost Weekend, the time when he broke up with Yoko Ono and lived in Los Angeles, indulging in bohemian life, alcohol, and creativity. The photo reflects the chaos and freedom of the era. Young Adam Sandler poses in a humorous scene at the beginning of his career. Such eccentric acts became his signature style on Saturday Night Live, where he often ridiculed images of macho and absurd masculinity. April 1968, the funeral of Martin Luther King. The coffin, mounted on a mule-drawn cart, symbolizes his commitment to modesty and folk roots. There are thousands of mourners around who have come to pay tribute to the civil rights fighter. A child ecstatically unpacks a Nintendo Entertainment System console, one of the most coveted gifts of the late 1980s. The scene is typical of an American family's Christmas morning: a carpet, pieces of packaging, and genuine childish joy. A break on the set of the movie Remember Everything, 1989. Arnold Schwarzenegger and team members dine against the backdrop of the futuristic fast food Mars Burger, illustrating the combination of blockbuster fiction and the simple routine of filming. A woman from the Mersey tribe, Ethiopia, holds a Vogue magazine, encountering Western fashion aesthetics for the first time. The contrast between African traditions and glossy cover images highlights the cultural divide and the impact of globalization. The pedal car was a luxury toy in the 1930s. Such machines were made by hand, often from metal, and were expensive. The photo highlights a rare case. An African-American boy, at that time with a similar toy, is a sign of the family's high social status. Union Army veterans, 1861-1865, drop roses over Gettysburg Field, where one of the bloodiest battles of the American Civil War took place in 1863. These people are the last living witnesses of that massacre, who staged an aerial commemoration 75 years after the battle. The meeting of two musical legends, George Harrison, the Beatles, and Bob Marley, a reggae icon, filmed in London in 1975. Despite their different styles, both musicians were spiritually oriented and advocated peace and freedom. The photo was taken during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. Local farmers helped the Americans by pointing out the routes of retreat of the German troops. This is an illustration of the importance of the interaction of the army with the civilian population in the liberation of Europe. Charles Bob Schumann is a player on the Citizens team in Pennsylvania. His weight was 205 kilos, 450 lab, and he is considered the heaviest baseball player ever to take the field. Despite his size, he played on equal terms with the others. The photo is a unique artifact of early baseball. A beluga weighing 1,152 kilos was caught in the Caspian Sea and displayed in Bobkov's store in Moscow. The photo from the 1910s became famous due to the colossal size of the fish and demonstrates the scale of fishing before the introduction of protective measures. The photo shows employees of a Soviet animal farm feeding beavers from bottles. In the USSR, beavers were actively bred for the sake of fur and population restoration, and such scenes were part of the scientific approach to animal husbandry. This experimental bike in Chicago in 1948 was created to demonstrate the concept of armed patrol. It held 13 barrels of various calibers, including shotguns, rifles, revolvers, and even a flare gun. North Korean prisoners of war dance a quadrille in an internment camp in South Korea, 1952. Dance has become an element of the re-education program, and in the background, you can see the symbolic Statue of Liberty, a sign of Western propaganda. A rare photograph in the Registry Office of Uzbekistan, 1925. The bride and groom, strictly observing the traditions, formalize the marriage. The woman is completely covered with a veil. The scene symbolizes the clash of Islamic culture and the Soviet secular system. The photo captures the famous Fieldbrook tree stump in California, taken in the 1890s. These are the remains of a giant sequoia tree cut down in the forests of Humboldt County. The diameter of the stump is about 10 meters. The age of the tree exceeded 1,000 years. To cut down such a colossus, it took about 2 weeks of manual work with two-handed saws. The photo shows more than 40 people standing and sitting on a tree stump, which highlights its scale. Russia, 1916. The photo shows an extremely progressive treatment of alcoholism at the beginning of the 20th century. A doctor in a military uniform pours castor oil down the patient's throat in so-called horse doses. The technique was considered the latest, and the photo was signed by hand directly on the film. France, 1915. Mother and child at the hearth in gas masks. This is not an exaggeration. During the First World War, chemical weapons were used so often that even in villages they cooked food without removing protection. Germany, 1924. This is Adolf Hitler, right after he was released from Landsberg prison. He had just served time for a failed coup attempt known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He will become chancellor in 9 years. The picture shows actor Haruo Nakajima, who took off his Godzilla costume between takes. He played the monster in all the films in the franchise from 1954 to 1972. Khrushchev and Castro at a Georgian feast. The Soviet leader treats the Cuban comandante with a traditional horn, a scene that would seem absurd if it were not a historical fact. Georgia, 1963. 19th century, these metal objects seem more like weapons than toys, but these are antique baby rattles made of silver and mother of pearl. The Navajo Weatherman, 1904. A photo of a Navajo man wearing a mask and fir branches. He portrays the Nainli, a rain spirit designed to cause precipitation in the arid desert. This ritual has remained a part of the culture of a people dependent on nature for centuries. The Last Journey from Amsterdam, 1943. Jewish families wearing yellow stars walk with suitcases through the quiet streets. This is the deportation from Amsterdam to the concentration camps. It's a tragic moment when ordinary homes turn into a point of no return. Their faces are a story of pain. Plein Air in Finnmark, 1884. Norwegian artist Wilhelm Otto Peters paints a painting right on the coast. It depicts fishermen searching for worms in shallow water. This picture is a rare window into the process of creating art of the 19th century, frozen against the backdrop of the harsh nature of the North. Jennifer Aniston without filters, late 90s. A rare and daring photo shoot of an actress in a street image. You've hardly seen Aniston like that on screen. The future of the 30s. A refrigerator with a ball. This stylish round, topped unit is not an art object, but an elite refrigerator from the 1930s. He worked on Freon and was considered a sign of prosperity. Today, these are a godsend for collectors of retro household appliances. The moment when the centuries-old silence was broken by a crash. In 1930, people in Murom watched the bell tower of the Church of the Nativity of Christ fall. Not an earthquake, but an explosion initiated by the new government. The photo shows a moment between the past and the future, caught in the dusty veil of history. Luxury of the 40s, fitting shoes right on the running board of the car. This is not a frame from a movie, but a real service from the time when shopping turned into a performance. A man chooses the perfect match for a lady without leaving the car, refined comfort against the backdrop of post-war America. New York Street, 1913. A tram with an open platform, a mother holds a child, helping to get down. No handrails, no insurance, just trust and agility. This frame is a reminder of what everyday life looked like before ergonomics and safety. A bright day in 1940. The young John F. Kennedy had just graduated from Harvard. He wears an academic robe and a cap, the attributes of a graduate. But no one suspects that this guy will become the President of the United States, a symbol of the era, and a target for one of the most notorious mysteries of the 20th century. The silence of the deck will soon be replaced by the roar of war. June 14, 1942, the solemn commissioning of the battleship Roma, the pride of the Italian Navy. In the frame are officers in white uniforms, sailors and guns pointing at the sky. A year later, this ship would be sunk by the Germans, becoming a symbol of betrayal and tragedy. A recreated model of Elasmotherium sibericum, an extinct prehistoric rhinoceros. The animal lived in the steppes of Eurasia and disappeared about 39,000 years ago. The height at the withers is up to 2 meters. The length of the horn is over 1 meter. It is often called the Siberian unicorn. February 1945. The Yalta Conference is a crucial meeting of the leaders of the anti-Hitler coalition. In the photo, Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill discuss the post-war structure of Europe. During this period, key agreements were reached on borders, the fate of Germany, and the creation of the United Nations. The American Civil War, 1862. Officers of the Army of the North are resting in the camp. In the foreground is Lieutenant George Armstrong Custer, later known for the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The situation shows the life of Army officers in the field. A rare representative of Architeuthis, a giant squid, has been washed up on the beach. This deep-sea creature can reach a length of more than 12 meters. The photo was taken in New Zealand, one of the few places where such finds are possible. 3 horsemen in national clothes gallop down a mountain slope. The photo was taken in Dagestan in 1968. From time immemorial, such riders have participated in military campaigns, as well as in traditional equestrian games, preserving the way of their ancestors. Chicago, 1928, young female flappers. Symbols of the emancipation of the 1920s, celebrate during Prohibition. The flappers rejected traditional norms, wore short dresses, smoked, and expressed themselves freely. Bigfoot 5 is one of the biggest monster trucks in history. It was built in 1986, weighs more than 17 tons, and the tires are from a military transporter for lunar rovers. The photo shows an exhibition in the museum. January 13, 1991, Vilnius. Citizens attach Soviet passports to the barricades in protest against the storming of the Soviet army, a symbol of peaceful resistance for Lithuanian independence. French actors Gérard Depardieu and Pierre Richard on the set of one of their joint films. Their duet became a symbol of French comedy of the 1970s, charisma, absurdity, and sincerity. Photos from the end of the 19th century. The players gathered in one of the New York taverns. The atmosphere indicates the popularity of card games in an era without televisions and radio broadcasts. A family of 4 makes cigars at home. For a 12-hour day, they rolled about 3,000 cigars a week, earning $3.75 per thousand, an example of child labor at the end of the 19th century. The American Civil War. The giant wooden device was used as fake artillery to mislead the enemy. an early example of psychological warfare. If you liked it at least a little, show maximum activity on the channel, like subscribe to the channel and leave a comment as much as possible. Thank you.